know it's a lot of work to absorb, so I'm here to answer any questions if I can. Yes?
Dominic, every filmmaker has to have some measure of courage, bravery, just by nature of the process of filming, editing, etc. But on multiple viewings of your work, this time I'm really struck by your zeal for freedom. It's almost as though you never saw a fence or a gate that you didn't want to demolish. Do you think that's fair?
I guess so. Yeah. It's a search. It's a search to be totally free, and whether or not we can be is another part of the human condition. I think we all struggle to be free for the most part. Maybe it's a high assumption.
Have you found some freedom as a creative artist in doing your films?
Yeah, the most courage it really takes is to sit in an audience and have your film projected. That's the most courageous thing any filmmaker can do. When you reach that point, you know that you've overcome a barrier. And I remember the first time sitting in an audience, watching my film projected. I thought it was God's gift to creation. I look back at it now and I'm embarrassed, but I'll never forget my heart pounding and, trying to figure out, is an audience going to comprehend this, or is this just garbage, that nobody understands but me, and that's a very difficult thing to do. In this day and age, with the proliferation of digital media, it's easy to put your stuff up on the computer and have everybody see it. But when you see it this big and your eyes can't go anywhere else except down to the floor or closed because you're sleeping, and you realize you have a captive audience. It's much different than looking at a computer where the phone is ringing, the dog is barking, the wife is trying to talk to you, and you're itching. That's a whole different experience. And so this, I think, the most courageous thing to do, and it's the hardest thing to do. I always sit. I was asked this question online. How does a filmmaker sit through their work with an audience, or do you leave? Like in feature films, the director will go outside the coffee shop, get an interview, and come back in, 88 minutes later, just to stand up but doesn't watch the film with an audience. But for me, it's always a unique experience to do that. It depends on how it's projected, and I see different things in it all the time. Oh God, I should have removed that scene. That sound's not working. And you think you cover that in the production because you've seen it 100 times, but there's always something that I say, I could have gone further with this, or I could have done something different with this, but I can't change it. All I can do is work on the next project and hopefully not make the same mistake. Yeah, Anthony.
Yeah, I kind of want to follow up on what Bonnie was saying. Is one of the things I've always admired about your work is apropos of freedom, like he was talking about. One of the things I admire most as I get older is people that have the ability to be almost multi-genre. One of the things I get most tired, we all love the Joni Mats, we all love the Nick Norskys, but you get tired of people who feel so constrained to do one specific thing. And whereas, like, for example, we'll think of a great poet, somebody who's known as being a great poet, but it's little known that they have also done political essays, or they've done other genres. They feel the freedom to be able to, apropos the verse song, make it comedy. And that's one thing that I've always really admired about you. You have that, I get the sense anyway, that you feel the freedom to Go
you-
ahead, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, you have a good point, Anthony, and I thank you for your camera work for the opening of Aeon. Anthony's in the film, he's winding the camera up over the superimposed
What
water.
we're talking about.
You know, trying to swim the camera through the dark waters of the subconscious. But, I enjoy exploring, different avenues in my films. And I do enjoy making comedies and just poking fun at things, I'm not like George Kuchar who can make like, a 20-minute comedy and have people laugh. I don't think I have that capability. In 2 or 3 minutes, I could probably do.
How many cups of coffee did Ronald drink in the Espresso short? How many
Absolutely
cups of
none.
coffee?
Absolutely none.
Oh, okay. Oh,
That's a
And I apologize about the screen ratio. For some reason, I couldn't get a full screen on the transfer here. That's one of the reasons why Aeon and Lumine came in, because I could not explore the City Symphony any further in my own artistic way. I just felt that I've seen enough bulldozers. People are not going to look at rebar the same way, and we're going to look at it. Okay, I've got that already. Okay, it's time to move on. And
You call it the Universe Symphony.
yeah.
well said, yeah.
So so who knows what the future brings, but right now I'm wrapping up old films. Diary films are part of that. Things that I just couldn't throw away, and they kind of exist. So I just sort of like a writer would write a journal. I've got several more of those coming out. One about Havana, another demonstration film in Buffalo, and some stuff I shot in Argentina and in Europe and former Eastern Germany, etc. So I want to wrap those things up when I go to Tucson for a month in peace and quiet in the desert. There aren't a lot of airplanes because there's a big Air Force base in Tucson. So the Blue Angels are giving me use of the noise. Yeah, Turkey.
Yeah. Thank you so much for filming.
Sure, thanks for coming.
One thing that I really appreciate in translating the language of is the sound design that you have. Really, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. My question is all the footage that we saw today were filmed?
Everything that we saw today was shot on film.
And even the last one was in Korea too?
Yeah, that was 16 millimeter.
Wow.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, everything. I recently transferred stuff I shot on tape and as diary film, so I'll see how that works. I'm not happy with the images I'm getting on digital film, on digital cinematography. I'm just, it looks great in the camera, and the minute I get it home and watch it on, it just looks like.
But you see how the sound is really beautiful. Like the way it's kind of like it translates, and that's the beauty of cinema as a language. Because
Yes.
we can, it's not just a music or poetry or a sculpture. No, that's cinema.
Yes.
You combine it all together. I can see that it translates all together. I appreciate the sound design.
Yeah, thank you. In Aeon, although nobody knows it, it'll just sound like noise. Like the opening sound, they've actually recorded the sound. Planets make sound. They've actually discovered that they make sound. So it opens up the sound. That's the sound of the Earth. It's not electronic sound, but it's translated electronically, so it's electronic sound. And then the sound of the sun, and there's also the sound of different planets that scattered throughout the mesh of sounds that you're hearing there. So, but who cares, right? I mean, it's the experience that comes out.
That's your poetry. That's all your language.
Yeah,
That's
so
the beauty of it.
Yeah, and it transcends. Our language gets in the way, like Robert Fulton was saying. Like the words create a barrier, you know? Oh, I'm working with light. Oh, do I really know what light is? You know? Just because I can say the words, I think I know what it means, you know?
How firm of an outline or a screenplay or a written list do you have when you go out to film for the first time for a project?
Nothing.
Is it more in post-production is when you find the movie and sculpt it?
My mission when I go out to shoot is try to capture what I consider to be a dynamic image or a dynamic moving thing. And I go out and I shoot a roll of what I think are dynamic moving things. And I'll play with superpositions and superimpose one dynamic. Now, what Bob Fulton taught me, and it's hard to teach this, is how to recognize a dynamic image. And so I'll shoot this whole roll of 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 45 seconds, who's counting, of images, and I'll get it back and I'll look at it, and I go, well, that's not dynamic. And then all of a sudden I'll see 1 or 2 frames that say, holy shit, how did I do that? And that's the wow moment. So then I go back out and I start to shoot the wow moment, you know, which is what happened in Lumine. I was just filming this off the computer, you know, 12 frames per second with black and white film that has 4 ASA. Am I going to get anything? You know, I don't know. And I came out with this stuff and it's like, holy cow. So I just explored that, you know. And then it begins to tell a visual story, you know, and that's sort of how it works. So it's easier for me to go out with nothing, you know, just my eye.
I mean, Dominic, that's another thing that I have to say. I am so envious of you and so many other 99% of our friends in the experimental film community, because I cannot work that way. I have to have a concept, like a lot of our friends will, you know, they'll go out in the woods and shoot, and then they'll figure out, to quote Mike Kuchar, actually, figure out what the film's about as he's making it. I can't do that. I have to have a concept.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's why I'm not a prolific filmmaker, because first of all, financially, it's 60 million. You press that button once and you spend $50. So it's like, I envy filmmakers that can just whimsically do that and then finds, as you said, like, holy shit, that one film.
well,
I can't work that way.
Yeah,
Envious.
all filmmakers are unique and they all have their own way of working. And you know, I admire it all. Whatever works for you is fine. You know, that doesn't work for me. So I gave that up a long time ago. When my first narrative film.
Have you ever been approached to make music videos for bands?
No, but I was approached by Absolute Vodka for 2 minutes. I turned them down. They offered me $20,000.
Wow.
I turned
And you trim them down? God damn, dude.
them down.
Question, yeah.
Dominic, as an independent and individual filmmaker, you've collaborated with a lot of people.
This
And-
time around, yeah.
Yeah, all different types of people in all different ways. So, on the one hand, you have your independent freedom, but you seem wired, maybe as a Libran, to work with other people and collaborate even live at screenings with musicians or poets, and then, you know, sound, as Turkey said, various credits to sound engineers. Anthony's here, who's worked with you. You seem to like to collaborate.
It's seeming that way. Yeah, this is a recent development. I used to just collaborate with Kevin and my sound designer. And now there are certain people whose judgment I trust and who know my work and who have studied my work in a serious way. And I value their opinions. You know, I often disagree with them, you know, and that's fine, but I still value their input. There's one film I made, it's called The Soul of Things, and I showed it to a friend of mine you know, I wasn't gonna do anything with it, because it's like, oh, this is the same thing, bulldozers, rebars, blah, 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 blah. I'm making the same film over and over again. And she goes, no, that's beautiful, look at that blackness, look at that. And it's like, no. You know, so other people can see things that I can't see. And, because sometimes you just get too close to the work, you know, and, you know, and I find that to be valuable.
Can you, somebody mentioned community, can you talk about over so many years making films where you found a sense of community and how you maintain that artist, you know, filmmaker sense of community?
Well, there was that in San Francisco, had a big dynamic community. In the 80s, I found, working with my friend Dean Snyder and people who opened up the Know Nothing Cinema, I would shoot footage for him, and he'd use it in his films, and then he would do some sound work for me. And that has kind of dissipated with the diversity of the medium itself. And it seems like people have crawled back into their computers and now work isolatedly. And we don't have screening venues anymore.
Where would you say if people want to see more experimental films or
ATA.
independent, where should they go?
There's only one
Still
place
around.
left in San Francisco
Tonight.
that consistently shows experimental films. That's the other cinema. It used to be MoMA, used to be the Cinematheque, and they've all become esoteric.
Does Canyon still do screenings?
Canyon occasionally does screenings.
Can you explain Canyon quickly, like to
Yeah.
folks who are unfamiliar?
Yeah, Canyon Cinema is a filmmakers distribution company. Has existed here in San Francisco since 1967. It actually started around 62, but officially became incorporated around 67. I ran it for 32 years, and I'm in the process of writing a book about my experiences at Canyon and my story, many stories to tell about many filmmakers, internationally known and locally known. But Canyon Cinema is still alive. They distribute experimental cinema. You pay a $100 membership fee and will distribute their work. It's still very healthy and still very going strong. Going very strong.
Any other questions? Yeah.
How do you work with music? And you said you have a sound designer and stuff. A lot of stuff I'm looking, is the music controlling the film, or is the film controlling the music? You know, how do you put that together?
Well, for me, I put the film together first.
Okay.
Then the sound comes later. Okay, a lot of filmmakers don't work that way, but that's the way that in Chicago, I used to make medical films, and you have a script, you know, how to film it, you know, and then you have a sound script, and the sound has to match the image. So the sound always came later. You know, the important thing was go in the operation room, do the filming, do all the crap that's going on there, and then you come back and then you fill in the narration. You know, so that's just been my habit of working. You know, I don't have sync sound equipment, so I can't go and you know, without going to digital. And, you know, I do that on my iPhone, but I really don't take that too seriously.
Somehow it seemed to me you would have said something different, you know, that, oh, we do it both ways, it goes back and forth.
No, I do. I take care of the imagery first.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Kenneth Anger used to talk about it when he was talking about editing Scorpio Rising. He used to compare it to like MTV things where the images are edited in sync with the audio as opposed to what he was trying to do. Even though if you watch Scorpio Rising, it looks synchronous.
Yeah, and sometimes sync comes in with the music. You know, when I work with the sound designer, the musician I work with, used to allow me to manipulate his sound. The sound designer would like stretch out the sound to fit the mood of the visual images. So we would work that way. But normally I don't think about sound until I've got the picture cut.
That surprises me.
Well, I'm glad, because it shouldn't look that way.
With regards to like, you know, it's always the magic question or the controversial question, like making a profit as an artist, making a living as an artist, like finding a way to support yourself, or if you decide to have a family, like all these kind of life things balanced with being an artist and doing the work you want to do. Can you speak on that a little bit, or?
Well, I can speak of it this way, okay, I file a Schedule C tax return, which is profit loss, and I've lost money since, for the last 55 years, based on $15,000 loss times 50, you figure that out, okay, that's about $750,000, I think. I've made maybe 10%. And how I make my films is I work jobs. My first film teacher, he was a German, and he owned a medical motion picture company that I worked with. His name was Deutsch. And he told me, if you have to make hamburgers to make a film, you better make hamburgers. And so, you know, I'd work at Canyon Cinema, and then I'd take my car and I would go and teach at the Academy of Art, or I'd go teach at UC Berkeley Extension, or I'd go teach at the Art Institute immediately after. And sometimes I was working all three jobs after Canyon Cinema, and it was the teaching that provided the income to make the movies. So, you know, being an artist in the United States is it's just not supported. The average American spends 25 cents a year in the support of art. That's the total budget of the NEA.
What countries do you think support artists the best?
France, Germany, those are the two that come to mind. I think even England. You know, I mean, you can see this film was made from lottery funds. You know, the United States, I mean, we have a California Arts Council, and they give no grants to artists. You know, their budget is just enough to keep them going. I mean, what's the point? You know, it's just absurd.
With the experimental form, have you ever experimented with like social media, like putting some of your films on there, or seeing like if people pay attention or what?
I do. You know, like I put them on Vimeo. It's very strange. Like I made a film called Voyeuristic Tendencies, and I put it up there on Vimeo, no password. If you know how to spell my name, you can watch my movies. Because Vimeo is very weird. You can't search by filmmaker, so I retitled all my films, putting my name in front of each title, so I can key in my name and everything's going to come up. But one day I got 1,200 hits on Voyeuristic Tendencies.
Oh.
And I think, you know, some adult site must have. You know, it doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason, and you know, I mean, it's up there if people want to see it for free. I'm not really making a whole lot of money off this. You know, I'd rather have people see the work and be influenced by it. And the minute I said, oh, now I'm going to try to sell all this stuff, nothing happens. You know, so I mean, that just doesn't work for me.
With like, I guess years ago, maybe you would find this more the hardcore film purists who would say, okay, I'm only going to project my work. You know, it's not going to be digitized. You're only going to see it projected. It's on film. It's got to be.
There's still a lot of filmmakers like that.
Were you ever like that? Were you ever of that kind of mindset, or?
I was until financially it became, and not only financial, but I mean, I was not too upset. I mean, I've always transferred my work, whether I transferred it to VHS, because, you know, because I could see, you know, like, you know, I own 50 projectors. I could see that people were selling projectors. You know, projectors were going, you know, they were being replaced by something else. And if I want to get my work shown anywhere, I've got to transfer it to. So even though I'm not happy with it, you know, I'm not totally happy with the transfers. but this doesn't even exist as a print, you know?
You know, I'm glad you said that, Dominic, because that's, you know me, I was, you know, a byproduct of Stan Brakhage. You know, and I remember Marilyn Brakhage 20 years ago, when I saw her after Stan had died. You know, the Criterion Collection had just put out the second Brakhage DVD, and she's up there bitching about it at the podium, like, oh, it's blasphemy that there's, you know, that universities are screening Stan's films on it. I never, and I mean, as you know, that goes back to, you know, back to the 60s when Brakhage and Warhol were bitching each other out, like video versus film, video. To me, that was always like, it's like comparing oil paintings to watercolors. It's fucking stupid. Like, one medium does things better than the other. Like, each have their own place. You know, I always thought that was absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it's still controversial because, you know, pixels do not equal, you know, when I went to France and I got a residency to make a film pre-pandemic called Revelations. And I was in the process of transferring all the 16 to digital, and I had a whole bunch of overexposed footage, and I asked the tech, I said, should I just not bring that? You know, he said, no, bring it. And then he's looking at it, and he says, oh, I see data. I said, what? He says, I see data in that whiteness. You know, and he went to Da Vinci, and he started screwing around with it, and out of the whiteness came this imagery that I'd never seen before. You know, and then I realized, oh, this is just data. This makes, oh, now I can easily work with data. I know data, you know, or dada, you know. I can work with that, you know, because I kept thinking I'm looking at an image, I'm looking at data.
You're looking at ones and zeros.
Now it all makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, okay, well now anything's possible. And for me, it was kind of an opening up, especially when you saw data where there was no image. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people stop me whenever they see me work at the shooting my bullets. They're like, why are you shooting on film? And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing it because I can.
Okay.
Right at this stage.
Just say you want to.
Yeah, exactly. It's like digital is going to be there for the rest of our lives. Like, not worried about it. Kodak can pull the fucking plug.
So you
on that
think?
shit.
So you think digital will be here forever?
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Thanks. Dominic, you know, in recent years we've seen these retrospective screenings, and in the lives of many artists, you see phases from immature into developing maturity. And you seem to have been fairly mature out of the box. You may not realize that, but when we look at your work, there's a lot of consistency there. Please comment.
Oh, I thought it was a question.
Well, the question is,
Waiting for
the question is, do you feel that you view your art in a more mature way now, or do you agree with me that it's pretty consistent, that you were already there?
It was kind of consistent, you know. You know, when I first started making movies, I was doing a lot of acid, doing a lot of, you know, stuff, and I mean, yeah, I tried to shoot on acid just to see if my hallucinations were there, you know, and it kind of clicked, you know. I threw away the light meter because I didn't know how to read it. I mean, it's like, what's this thing, you know? And I threw it in Delaware Park somewhere, you know, and I had to go back the next day and find it because I had to turn the camera back into the university with the light meter, you know. And luckily it was still there. But, you know, I think I had made a commitment at that time. I think it was a commitment to the media and the commitment to the image that I had made. Because I saw all the choices of artistic ways I could go. You know, I had guitars, you know, I could play them. You know, I had tried painting, you know, it was awful, you know, and it was like, I gotta do something, I'm not sure what it is. And I think it was that grabbed me, you know, at a very early stage in my filmmaking.
Did you have any?
That explains it. I mean, that explains it. I didn't know what, you know, after all these years, I didn't know what your answer would be. But
Oh,
it's
me
almost
neither.
as though, it's almost as though you had a sense of who you were and what you wanted to do from that first experiences of freedom.
Yeah.
It's true.
And it seemed okay to me, you know, it seemed okay. You know, I mean, the price, I mean, the cost has always been a problem. My first paycheck, instead of paying the rent, you know, I went out and bought a pair of rewinds.
Did you have a lot of artists in your family?
Not really, no. Well, my dad did paint by numbers, you know. Not really, no. I mean, they're kind of, you know, I'm the oddball. You know, my niece is a writer. She writes novels, so she's pretty good. She's pretty cool. No, I mean they're blue collar, you know, blue collar normal people. You know.
Do you have any thoughts?
I told my father, yeah, well, I teach in the evening after work. And he says, don't worry, son, one day they'll put you on a day shift. I mean, that was his concept, like I'm teaching night school. You know, like how to drive cars or something. You know? They have not a clue.
What was your, like, if you could kind of narrow down one of your biggest joys as a teacher, as a professor, you know, as an educator, what really,
You know, is generating a spark out of somebody. You know, generating, you know, opening up their eyes when they're kind of, they want to open them, but they're too lazy to, or they're just resistant. You know, and that's always satisfying. You know, when you find a gifted student that can really carry on.
well, thanks for being here
Okay,
today.
thank you all.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Are we passing the hat today, by the way?
If you would like to, you could. You could donate. We have a